Joining me now for The View from the Trump campaign is former Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. Thank you so much for being here, sir. And I do want to talk about some of the criticisms you had of the Trump campaign yesterday. This was one of them. You said that our latest strategy of repeatedly labeling Kamala a radical leftist will soon fall flat. And it's interesting because the first response for the Trump campaign today to Harris picking Tim Walz was to call him a radical leftist, as you saw in that video that we just played. Are you worried that this campaign's line of attack is a miscalculation?
So, look, one of the things I've also said is I believe that Josh Shapiro was going to be the VP pick. I was wrong about that. This was a decision that I think still is confusing to me that the Democrats have made, but provides a great new opening for the Republicans. I've been the first to say the last couple of weeks have not been our strongest weeks. This provides the much-needed reset that actually resets this race and opens up a clear path to victory for Republicans. The bottom line is this. Walz is a progressive when it comes to policy. He presided over the BLM riots in Minnesota, which he led. He favors health care for illegal immigrants. So let's have that debate on policy. And if we have that policy debate, believe me, the reality is going to be Republicans come out on the economy, on immigration, on staying out of foreign wars. And if this election is decided on policy, that's what this pick does. It refocuses the debate on policy. I actually think it strengthens Republican chances.
But do they need to do more than just labeling him a radical leftist? Do they actually have to talk about some of these policies as opposed to just playing the name game?
Yes, and we will, and we have to. I've been clear about that. We cannot just fall into the trap of criticizing the other side. And if we're calling it straight down the middle here, I tell you that this pick presents risks for Democrats and Republicans. The pick of Walz as VP presents a risk for Democrats that they lose centrist voters over a lot of his progressive policy positions. The risk I see for Republicans is that he is such a progressive, and he's far on the left of many of his policies, that it becomes tempting to just focus on him instead of offering our own vision of who we are and what we stand for. That's ultimately what's going to be required for us to win this election. Seal the border, end rampant crime, grow the economy, stay out of World War III, revive national pride in this country. These are things that Donald Trump stands for. These are the things that the Republican Party stands for. And I think we have to resist the temptation and risk to forget to talk about that because of the ripe criticisms that the other side makes it so easy for us to now level.
I mean, isn't the person doing that the least is the candidate himself, Donald Trump? It seems at most of his rallies, he spends most of his time just calling people names and complaining about past grievances. It's rare that he actually offers up policy prescriptions. Do you think the candidate himself needs to do that more?
So I respectfully disagree with your characterization there. Look at that debate, the one that actually turned this entire race around, the CNN debate. That was a policy-focused debate where, with all due respect, Donald Trump mopped the floor with Joe Biden. The reality is that was so much the case that they had to swap out Joe Biden as a consequence. So I do think that Donald Trump cares deeply about policy. The dirty little secret, if I may, in this race is that between the two tickets here, between the two presidential candidates, Donald Trump is actually now the moderate on policy. You take the historical criticisms of the Republican Party, extreme positions supposedly on abortion, on gun control, on interventionist foreign wars. Let's just go straight down that list. Donald Trump opposes a national abortion ban against the will of many Republicans. He's taken a measured approach on gun control. He is against the Iraq War, and he's against other interventionist foreign wars. These are exactly the policy criticisms that Democrats have had of Republicans for years, yet Donald Trump is to the center of many Republicans on all of those questions. So if this race does, yes, come down to policy, I think it should be a hands-down victory, not just for Trump, but for candidates all the way down the ballot. And I think that's a big part of why you want to take Walz's selection. If I may just make this one point, because I think it's important. There's a little bit of a contradiction in how they're pitching him. On one hand, they say he's this Midwestern unifier. On the other hand, he is the guy who is leveling this charge of being weird on 70 million Americans on the other side. And I don't think you can have it both ways. I do think that that's divisive. I think it's the 2024 equivalent of Hillary Clinton's basket of deplorables. And I do think that that's going to come back to hurt Democrats if Republicans keep our eye on the ball. And that's what I'm urging us to do.
Well, then I want to get back to this idea of keeping the eye on the ball, as you rightly point out. And I would also point out that no one calls people names more than former President Trump. He does that on a regular basis, did that with Governor Kemp at his rally over the weekend. But it also seems as though that the former president is still pretty focused on Joe Biden. He claimed this afternoon that Biden would try and take back the Democratic nomination. He called out several Democrats' names in the process. Do you think that's where he wants to focus his policy right now?
Well, the reality is Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are part of the same ticket that leads this country today. She's trying to claim a lot of Biden's victories. So I do think it's fair game in a presidential election to say that that sitting president owns his policy record, and so does the vice president, who's now trying to take some credit, as much as she tries, for some of those alleged successes. Let's talk about the border. Let's talk about actually how even the stock market decline of the last week is undoubtedly correlated to at least increased expectations that the market has that Kamala Harris could be the president. So I do think that's fair game to look at the Biden and Harris regime or the administration as one ticket. That's how they've pitched themselves to their own voters. So I think it's fair game for Donald Trump to say that she also owns Joe Biden's policy failures. But that's a policy-focused discussion that I think is good. I think the country will be better off if this is an election decided on competing visions of policy for the future. I don't think it's going to be good if either side makes this about which side is weirder, alleging weirdness of the Republican Party. I just think it's divisive. I think it is a way of alienating whoever wins this election. It's going to cost 70+ million people to see themselves not as part of the same culture or country. Governor Walz is the one who started that. The reality is I hope Republicans are able to take a very different path to say this is who we are, and if we do, we win.
I mean, what you're describing, though, is not at all what Donald Trump has ever done over the course of his presidential or political career, for that matter. And you're asking him now to just completely focus on policy, not to call names, not to try and settle grievances from the past. We're 90 days out from this election. Obviously, you're calling for what appears to be somewhat of a different course when it comes to the campaign. Do you think there needs to be new leadership to try and encourage a more policy-focused campaign? Or is that impossible with Donald Trump at the top of the ticket?
Well, so look, I got to be very, very careful in precise in what we're saying here. What I'm going to say is that when the media puts Donald Trump into a corner, when the far left puts him into a corner, sometimes he's left with no other choice. When you have the other side alleging that you're weird and your people are weird, of course, the most natural charge is to say, well, you know what? We have a stronger case in return. You could think about refusal to define what actually a woman is, refusal to say that men should not compete with women in women's sports, taking away gas stoves out of ordinary Americans' hands. If Republicans want to play this game, yes, I do think we have a stronger case to say the other side is weirder than we are. But I think the better way to go, and you do hear this from Donald Trump, I think the media doesn't often report on it. What does he say? He says success is unifying. Success will be our vengeance. And I think that's an important part of the message, where that's a side of Donald Trump that the media doesn't often let voters see. I think people who have been to his rallies absolutely do take that message away. And I do think the more he leans into that message, one of the things you've been hearing him say even more that I love is it's not just about making America great again. It's about making America greater than we have ever been before, that success and ambition and excellence are our heritage. These are exact lines out of Donald Trump's speeches, not the ones that get reported on. Yes, I would say stick to those messages, and I think we're going to revive this country and hopefully win this election. And dare I say, let Trump be the president who unites the country.
Okay, Vivek Ramaswamy, thank you so much for your time, sir. We appreciate it. We're going to talk more about this now. Joining me on set